Hey everybody, what's up? It is Scuff D, and I am here on November talking about the World Eaters today. So let's get into it. Let's take a look at the World Eaters card pool. Alright, got the game loaded up here. So today we're going to go ahead and discuss the World Eaters. Not for any specific reason other than the fact that I've already gone through the neutral card pools. We've already done Sons of Horus, and World Eaters just happen to be next on the list. So switching over here to all cards, going down the list. Now I don't have Angron. We'll start with Angron because there he is. He's right at the start. Ultimately, you know, there are 3 out of these 4 Primarchs that you see enough. Angron is probably the number 1 for a couple good reasons. Number 1, he's a 240. He's a Primarch. He's got a huge health. He starts out as a +1, +0, so long as you have no troops in play. And this is actually changed from how he initially was when he first launched. He was just a straight 3-0 always, a 340 always, and that's changed, and I think the change is for the better. So he has to attack every turn. He's very straightforward. However, the World Eaters are probably the most aggro card pool in the game. Just tons of fast damage, high damage, quick damage as quickly as possible. Angron games, depending on who they're up against, what deck you're using to face them, can go to turn 8 to turn 10. Some of them just don't make it that far, depending on how much damage that he can just dish out. He's very solid. His whispers, let's take a look at the whispers that he's got here. So his whispers triggers when he's down to 1 health, and then he turns into your Demon Prince Angron. He gets really angry, and I cannot recall. I don't have Angron, so I have not been able to use him, so I can't say I've memorized it. He'll gain the 8 health. He gains double strike or bloodthirst, so he can attack twice, and I believe his attack also goes up by 1. Could be wrong on that, on the attack up by 1, but I believe that's the case. So if you've got your 3, you go up to an attack by 4, and you're attacking twice, so now he can deal 8, and that's usually the big closer. The trick with that is it's not going to be able to be used until he only has 1 health. So that's a tricky balance to get him down to. If you're playing against Angron, you don't want to get him to that 1 health. If you are Angron, you should have a few answers within your own pool here that you'll see that you can use to kind of dip you right to that perfect point, even if it's like a last phase strike to get you down to 1 health, and then you use your whispers and trigger back up. So that's Angron. Again, he is probably the number 1 out there. He's always been a top tier deck, top tier usage, and I think that's number 1 because he's straightforward, he's aggro. The World Eaters card pool is strong. It's supported well with the neutral damage cards that are out there, and then you combine it with just what the World Eaters do. They do it fast, and I think inherently in this game, a lot of people like fast games. They want their games to be straightforward. They want them to be direct. They want them to be fast so they can get on to the next thing. In ladder play, Angron and Karn see a lot of play, especially early into a season, because you can get those games over with quick. Whether it's a win or it's a loss, it's going to be a fast game. It's going to be over, and you can move on. And people like that. Some people just don't like the sit back and take your time. Nobody likes playing 900 games of Death Guard. You know, it's a viable option, but nobody likes doing it. They inherently are drawn to what the World Eaters bring. So Shabran currently, and many people hope, I'm one of the same, hope that he gets just a slightly bit better than what he is right now. He's actually, I think, the only epic warlord. I could be wrong. I think he's the only epic warlord, though, with a health of 30, aside from Ornitov. Which actually, let me just take a quick look. Yeah, Ornitov's got a 30. I guess Caleb's got a 32, but they're not legionary. I don't know. Anyways, so So his deal is he can do 2 damage to an enemy warlord and then 1 to adjacent troops. He's like a slightly improved Loken to a degree. His initiative is medium, and that's it. I think he could be better. Some people would like to see him maybe have cleave, very similar to the world leader warlord that we just saw in this last event. That's a possibility, or maybe change up instead of just being an enemy warlord, make it to a chosen unit. I don't know, or just make him a 235. You know, he's just like one off from being usable more, I think. I like him in the events that he's been in, but you don't see him enough outside of the events to actually give him justice. Erlen you actually see more, and that's for, boom, right here. High initiative. Great. High initiative is always a good on a warlord. He starts with an extra card. Yes, he has the same health as Shabrandar, but he also deals straight 3 damage to enemy warlord, and he has high initiative. So there's not, I mean, aside from, you might say, the splash damage from this effect, for a less rarity, a rare, he looks better. And he performs really well in ladder. 3 damage to a warlord, it doesn't matter if you're stealthed or not, Korax, he's going to do that 3 damage, and that adds up very quickly, especially when he's being supported by the world leader with card pool, which furthers up damage. So you do see Erlen a lot. You don't see him as much as Karn or Angron, but he is a very strong warlord, and he works very well, and he just works better than Dar. Karn is, of course, the one that everybody, when I started the game, I wanted Karn, and I'm glad I got him when I did, and he took me a very long way. I think he took me from, I think he took me all the way from Calth to Terra at some point, or maybe late Mars, and then I was able to pick up a Primarch at that point in time, but he just runs solid. He runs fast. Games with Karn go quickly. You might make it to turn 7, depending on how your game is gone. He can attack twice right out the gate. His trade-off with that is after attacking, he deals 1 damage to a random unit, which can include himself or units on your side of the table, which, the way the world leaders work, is sometimes a boon. So it's not necessarily a negative thing. If everything goes great in your opening turn, you're dealing 6 damage to your opponent's warlord, and they're dealt 4 to you. In Karn decks, you want to go heavy healing to bolster that fact that you're burning through him quickly to make his ability much more effective. And he's because his games can go so quickly, you don't want to have too many high cost cards in your hand. But he's a great pick. I don't know if he's maybe top tier, but I'd say definitely tier 1.5. He's very useful. He's very useful for a variety of reasons, and especially right now in the current meta is shifting back to just straight aggro face strikes. Right now, you're seeing a lot of that. I hope the Iron Warriors changes that we see here when the Drop Site Massacre stuff starts coming out, I hope that changes that. And it's nothing against aggro or speed of play. I like speed of play too, but I like making people try new things. I like pushing people out of their comfort zone. I think people should not just rely on the single solitary face strike decks, which are face strike meaning very supportive tactics and silver bullet cards, and then just using your warlord to constantly ramp up damage. I would like to see people shift from that. So that's just my personal preference. We'll see what the future brings. So draft scouts, they're cheap. You might see them in a Karn deck. You might see them in an Angron deck. Primarily for their backlash, not because they're ever really going to do any damage, but they're drawing cards. In an Angron deck especially, Angron wants to go through his cards. He wants to get all those big cards that you're going to see here as quickly as he can to get those high damage so that he doesn't run out of cards. Angron without any cards supporting him is not a strong Angron, so he needs cards. Drask Scouts is one way to get that. There are several other ways to draw cards. Lectitio Divinatus is often used, which gets you the 2 cards. Abandoned Supplies, which is a great card in general, is always used in Angron decks. These guys, as well as the Fastidian infantry right here, same backlash, same cost, slightly different health, but same effect. Get cards, get cards. If you're looking for spots, you might see those in those decks, and they can get those out quickly and get cards. Now this card here, I don't use myself, but some decks may want to use it to protect some of the troops that they've got from. It's just kind of, it's a niche. Gladiator Group 27 gives all troops in your hand, not what's on the table, all troops in your hand drop pods. So you really want to play it if you've got 2 or 3 units that you're going to be playing soon with drop pod. I actually find that it works really well against Raven Guard, because Raven Guard have got Sentence, and they've got Flank, and if you're putting drop pod, which is an extra protection plus 2 health, onto some of your key troops like Wraith, Argus, or any frontline that you might have, because this is not just world leaders or Astartes. This is any troop. If you're giving them that additional buffer, sometimes it's just what you need to throw off the Raven Guard mechanic, especially with a Korax where it's very strike and fade. So not a bad card, not a great card. Speaking of striking and fading, this one here, deal 1 damage. If target dies, draw a card. Most World Leader decks, Angron specifically, will pack this 1. Just because it's a 1 damage, you're drawing a card. Very often, you're going to bring a unit to 1 health, or they're going to be left on the table with 1 health and think that you're going to have to go for the face strike, and instead you just strike and fade it. You get a card. But this is also a card that works on your own warlord. So in the event that Angron is at 2 health late game and he has to attack and you don't want the draw, you can use strike and fade on yourself to drop to 1 health, which will allow you to use your whispers. Or if you've got 2 strike and fades, you can drop from 3 to 1, use your whispers and profit. So it's a good card. Again, you see it mostly in Angron, but it's universal across the World Leader card pool. It's a very good card. Cardok, I think you might see it in Erlen occasionally, but you almost always should see this in Karn decks. 2 of these in Karn decks are crucial. It heals 2 to all your units, which you may not have too many units, but that's going to include your Warlord. And if you've got certain units such as Wraith, Argus, some of your other what's the keyword for these guys? Rage. There you go. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. But rage. Some of your other rage units, it adds health back onto them to further that rage concept. So, rage is a thing that's not entirely specific to the World Leaders, but I'd say 95% specific to the World Leaders, in that when a unit takes damage, as you'll see, their rage triggers an effect, and the effect varies depending on the card, but the way you utilize rage is by triggering damage, which is why Karn is so useful, because he can sometimes put that damage onto your units. Strike and fade can be sometimes useful because you can strike and fade your own unit and trigger that effect. So Keth bikes, they're kind of like a frag grenade with a troop. So you drop them for 2, and they deal 1 damage to all enemies across the board, and then you've got a troop on table. They're okay, but they're not great. With Karn, you want to play them after you've attacked with Karn, because otherwise you could randomly hit those and then you just lose your troop, and it's not as effective. You don't want to play these guys necessarily against Korax, because you're just giving him a free turn of stealth for 1 damage, and most likely he's going to be the only thing on the table, so you're not really doing anything. You see them in World Leader decks, I would say 50% of the time. I think there are some better choices, but they're not a bad choice. They're just, right now, they're not great but they're solid for a 2-drop. I like Slurring Squad myself, mainly as a supportive to get cards drawn, and especially when in the current environment when a lot of people are using warlords to do attacks. Yes, they're not offensive, but even if they're just throwing their warlord at this guy here, that's going to be 2 attacks. That's 2 cards that it's given you for a trade-off. It's a good choice. And again, you know, world leaders, they want to get to those cards, especially Angron, Karn. They want to get to those cards. It may not work best in a Karn deck or an Angron deck, for the simple fact that it's not offensive. So if it stays on the table more than a turn, it's actually hindering Angron being able to do his full attack capabilities. Stole Squad here is very basic. They're 2/3, unstoppable. That's all they are. You see them played occasionally, just maybe as a cheap troop. They're not bad. They're not great. Sweep in advance is a very cheap, very usable tactic. Angron decks, I think, pack 2 of these. I only included 1 in a Karn deck, and I didn't regret it. I didn't need to include 2. It wasn't necessary. Just right off the top, gives +3/+0 to a friendly troop. That's never a bad thing. And if you've got fast troops, such as the World Eater Speeders, which we'll see here in a moment, or the Goldstone Hunters, that just turns your 3/3 to a 6/3, or your 4/2 into a 7/2. So, never a bad thing. Throne of Skulls, I don't think I've seen people use it, and I don't know if that's because they are trying it out or they don't have enough cards to use something else. I don't like Throne of Skulls. I don't think it's, I mean, for a 2 tactic, it gives your World Eater troops, only your World Eaters, not your infantry, a mark of Chaos and Berserk, meaning that they must act every turn, and then they're going to gain a random Chaos Blessing. So even if they gain something like Stealth, they still have to act every turn, and then that breaks Stealth, and Poison is more, I don't like it. I don't think it's useful. Probably why it's a common. Aggressive Tactics, I've seen play. I don't see it played enough, and I think in the World Eaters deck, especially in the card pool following the expansions, there's a lot of cards that draw you cards that you don't need Aggressive Tactics for. At the very least, it's going to get you 1 card for your opponent's damaged Warlord. Beyond that, there's just better cards for better economy to draw you cards. At best, you might have to be able to draw 7 cards. Hey, that's great, but at that point in the game, do you need 7 cards? If you're playing 3 energy, you should be further along. So, I would pass on that. Barsk Squad is okay. I've included them just as a 3 cost for a 3/4. Their rage triggers makes them deal 1 damage to a random unit, and they have Berserk and they have to attack, so that trigger is not going to be avoidable. That damage can hit your side of the table, which could trigger another rage, which could trigger some other rage, and so on and so forth, depending on how many troops you have on the table with rage. It could just do a damage to your warlord. It's kind of a give and take, but for 3 cost, 3/4, they're not terrible. If you're looking for a 3, I would most likely recommend the Crash Spikes, but they're not a bad choice either, just because they've got the 4 health. I don't like Butcher's Nails either. I like the concept of it. It's a icon in regards to what the World Eaters are, into their lore, into their background, and what builds them. And this very much ties into it. It gives +2 and Berserk to all the starters in your hand. That makes a lot of sense. It just doesn't make much use. I think if it was a 2 cost, it would be better. It just feels like you're pumping up something before you get it onto the table, and you're really just, it's not going to be as effective. I've never seen somebody use Butcher's Nails with great effect. I'd pass on it, in my opinion. And like I said, Crash Spikes here, they're a 3/3 with Bloodthirst, which, depending on the timing and how you put them out, they could potentially do 6 damage to a unit or to a warlord, depending, or you do 3 damage to a troop that is at 2 health that you, or 2 attack that you want to kill, and then you use them for something else. They're versatile. That's not bad. They're fragile. Abaddon can deal with these guys very easily, but they're not bad. They're just, you want a time when you put these guys out. If you can put them out early, great. Sometimes if you put them out late game, it's even better though. These guys here, the Seraph Landspeeder, these are 2s in every World Eater deck, because first off, yes, they're a 4/2, but they're fast, and that means that they are basically, for 3 energy, they're 4 damage to anything, whether that's your opponent's warlord or a frontline troop, or another troop that's at 4 health that you want to get rid of. As I mentioned before, you can ramp it up with Sweep and Advanced, make them a 7, which is often what you see. They're very good closers, just like with Goldstones. For the same cost, there's no reason not to have 2. If you don't have 2 and you see these guys in the shop, pick them up. If you plan on playing World Eaters, you need to have those. You won't get the full experience if you don't have those. That's just it. And you don't see too many World Eaters with land speeders anymore. That's because they drove them into oblivion. They were just that eager to get into combat, and that makes sense. But for this time being, for this setting, for this game, there they are. Use them. Sedition's Gate is the World Eaters destroy a troop card. Every legion except for Raven Guard has a destroy a troop card. And this is theirs. So your basic destroy a troop card, let's just go back to the Sons of Horus for just a moment here. Your basic destroy a troop card is your 5-cost outflank. 5-cost destroy an enemy troop. Boom. No drawback, no contingency, common. Now World Eaters take it up a notch. It's 3 costs, so it's 2 points less. However, you have to destroy a friendly troop and a random enemy troop. To use this one, you have to have a friendly troop on the table, and then the trade-off with it is, for being 2 cost less, is the troop that you're destroying is random on your opponent's side of the table. Most of the time, this can be controlled in terms of there's only 1 troop on the table that you want to get rid of anyways, so you drop a cheap guy, use Sedition's Gate, get rid of their guy, and you're even across the board. Or you attack, kill that guy, Sedition's Gate, get across the board. It's controllable, but that explains its reduced cost. I like to explain here, and the World Eaters, I think, in my opinion, have the most board clearing, troop destruction capabilities out of all the legions, which makes them a very good counter to Raven Guard, who utilize stealth. And a lot of people complain about the stealth. The Raven Guard have seen some nerfs, some changes as of late. They're still very effective, but I think another reason why we're seeing a lot of World Eater cards is because they're fast, they're cleared, and you can have yourself in stealth. But I can Sedition's Gate, and I don't have to target you. You're random, but you're still, if you're the only stealth unit on the table, you're going away. There's some other cards here. You'll see Conqueror, for instance, clears the board. That doesn't matter what you have. It's going to kill it. So I think the World Eaters are a very strong counter, I would say, to Raven Guard. It's a quick game, one way or the other. But if the World Eaters draw right, they can just deal out way more than the Raven Guard can in a short amount of time. Ron Veterans are great in a Karn deck. They're decent in Angron, but again, any troop that sits on the table longer than a turn or 2 with Angron is taking away from what he does best. So with Karn, these guys for 3 can become a 4/4 right out the gate. Now, if I remember correctly, during beta, I think they had a 5 health initially. They have a 4 health now. But if Karn's random ping does not hit these guys, then that's a beefy 4/4 that your opponent has to deal with on the next turn. Usually, in my experience, it hits them at least once, so they become a 4/3. But still, then the next turn he attacks again. They could become a 6/3, and that's nice. So if you have Ron Veterans and you have Karn, you should be using 2 of these. And if you're not, or if you have Karn and you're looking for more cards to include, look for these guys in the shop, because these guys are a good payoff. Now, Lork Squad used to be a 3/5. I liked it as a 3/5. I think it might have even been a 4/5, but I don't think so. I think it was a 3/5. 3/4 is okay too. I put these guys in. They're 4 cost. Their rage is a little bit different, where they deal 1 damage to a random enemy. So not a random unit, it's a random enemy unit. And these guys work really good in Karn, because even if his ping hits them, it's still technically going to swing back and hit your opponent on the other side. So it might take away 1 health and it takes an extra turn, but it's still going to get to the other side of the board, which is what you want. And the fact that these guys are unstoppable is nice. They're not game-breaking, they're not the broken, but they're good to put out there. If you use them, and you use them with Karn, and they get pinged twice, they're still doing 2 damage to your opponent's side of the table. And then on top of that, there are 3/2 that your opponent has to deal with on their turn, which not only means that they have to spend a card dealing with them, but it also means that that's another damage that is going to go to your opponent's side of the table. So overall, a good card, not to be passed on. And there's another card here that I think is a great answer that the World Eaters have in regards to like Raven Guard, or any of the the cheap swarmy, like I guess Iron Hands, Ferrous Manus decks you might see. No Survivors is a 4 cost, and it deals 2 damage to all enemies, and then for each unit killed, give a mark of chaos to a friendly non-demon troop. Now, in an Angron deck, most of the time they're just going to use it for the deal 2 damage to all enemies. If they are able to use it in conjunction with the troop on the table, that's a bonus for them. But this is going to deal 2 damage. This is going to kill many of the Raven Guard units that are at 2 health that are very useful. It's going to kill most of the troops that are at 2 health in... Well, anything that's at 2 health is going to be dead, but I mean, like, there's a lot, like Tarek, Sons of Horus. Some Death Guard can get to 2 health and operate well, and this can clear board. It depends on the timing with it, and how it's used, but it's an inclusion in the Angron deck, and I don't know if you see it in Karn necessarily as much, but you definitely see it in Angron, and it is another answer that the World Eaters have. Wraith is an all-star. Wraith has been changed slightly. Not himself necessarily, but the unit that he puts into play. Initially, way back yonder, I think he was a 3/3. I think I got him after he was changed. Regardless, either which way, I got him as a 3/2, but I think I played an event way back when, and he was a 3/3. I could be remembering something differently, but the way he works is basically he's a berserk, but his rage is he puts a unit in play. So for 4 energy, if you deal 1 damage to him, you get a free unit, and you still have him. And if you deal 2 damage, you lose him, but now you have 2 free units. And we'll take a look at the units that you put out here. His is berserkers. So these guys initially, and they've just been changed, this is new, were a 5/5/5, so 5s across the board. Now they're 4s, 4s, 4s. A little weaker, but still not bad. If I'm killing 1, I'm still getting 1, and if I'm doing it twice, then I'm getting 2. That's 8 for the cost of 4, or if you happen to be healing, paying attention here, you could pump that up beyond 2. You could do 1, heal, do another 1, get another 1 out. Wraith is a bone of contention for some people. He's a very useful tool. He's there's ways to deal with him. He comes out right at a 4 cost, so that's right at the destruction card range. So he can easily be destroyed. Now, destroy does not trigger rage, so that's not going to happen, and that's how many people get past Wraith. Jubok, returning him to the hand, is another reason why, or not Juvok, I'm sorry, Melgator is the other card that delays him, but it kind of buys you a turn. Or you just say, okay, I'm not going to attack him, I'm going to make him attack. So this guy comes out. When they do come out, they're unusable that turn, and then you've got a turn to deal with a 4/4 troop. They're not the end game, but I think enough people must have complained recently with Karn randomly pinging Wraith and making 2/5/5s. You know, now your opponent's got 2/5/5s on the table to deal with. That happens. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we'll see that come back someday, but ultimately still not a bad card. An auto include in a Karn deck for sure. Even an Angron deck, just because he can do 3 and he can trade off for 4, and the world leaders love their damage. Now the Roth Land Speeder here's got Cleave 3. Again, another answer to Raven Guard's stealth. If you've got Cleave 3, that's going to cleave into stealth. So if you're attacking their warlord, you're doing their 3/4, and you're either killing or severely maiming any stealth units. That's huge. You don't see these guys as a 2 of in too many decks, but they do come out and they become a target. And if you can't deal with it, you kind of don't like it. I think this is one of 2 cards in the World Leader card pool that give them cleave, but they're strong, and for 4 cost, they're not bad. They're 1 point off and 1 stat off in all regards to the Sons of Horus cleave troop. And I think that makes them better, to be honest with you, just because they can come out quicker. Now Argus Brond, this guy, don't leave him unchecked. If he comes out, his rage is huge, is crazy. It doubles the attack of this troop. So if he just takes 1 point, he goes to an 8/5, and then that 8 gets doubled, and then that doubled 16 gets doubled, and very quickly he can become insane. There are some pictures people have posted of just how much math crazy Argus can get. You throw more like attack boosts, like you have to throw a sweeping advance on him, and that doubles. It's ridiculous. It's kind of fun. It doesn't happen that often, and usually if it does, people are just seeing how high they can get him before he just delivers like some killer blow. But he's at that destroy troop range with the 5 cost, so he's dealable. The javelin speeder from Raven Guard can one-shot him. Any destroy troop can one-shot him. He can be bounced. He can, he can take 2-3 shots and be destroyed. He's not unkillable, but you don't want to leave him out long, especially in a World Eater's deck that is packing 2 strike and fades, because they can strike and fade him for those 2 energy and turn him into a 16 damage beast, and just that's probably end game at that point in time. So keep that in mind. Don't let him sit if you can, or if you've got a wall in front of you, that's the best thing that you're going to have. Now Gorechild is pretty self-explanatory. Gives +1 to your warlord. It's a 5 cost. I don't know if you see 2 of these in Angron decks or not. I don't run Angron because I don't have Angron, so I couldn't tell you, but you typically see at least 1, just because that buffs him up to a 4 if there's no troop on the table. That's great. This is even better in Karn. It's not always useful in Karn, because that turn 5 and turn 6 is really kind of like, which way is it going to go? But if things have been working out in your favor, this gives Karn the edge significantly. I usually ran 1 of Gorechild in a Karn deck. Didn't use it every time I had it in my hand, just when I felt I needed to, or when it would work best. But anytime you're enhancing your warlord, that's not a bad thing. Harl Squad. They're a 5 for a 5/5, and they're berserk, and they're unstoppable, and they got some funky art. It's not terrible, but it looks like he's got a jetpack upon jetpacks. I'm sure there's actually supposed to be some characters out of frame there that you're not seeing, but I'd pass on them. Monument of Corn is another one that seems cool. I'd pass on that too. First off, it's a structure, so it's not able to attack. In an Angron deck, that's a no-go, because it's going to stay on the table, and that's reducing his attack. The benefit seems cool. It's giving adjacent troops +2/+0, and then when it comes into play, it gives Berserk to all of your troops that are on the table. Again, it's just, I'd pass on it. You're giving adjacent troops, so you have to have troops on table +2/+0 for 5. When you're better off just packing 2 sweep in advance to give a troop +3/+0, so you can utilize it better. Now, Scan Squad I like, and this is again another one that deals 3 damage. It's a significant cost. Don't get me wrong. You don't see these too often. You might see them in an Erland deck. You might see them in a Dar deck. When you see a Dar deck, they're a high cost, but if they hit the table, beefy health of 6, decent attack of 4, and then for 4 energy, they're dealing 3 damage to an enemy and adjacent units, and that is just gonna, just in the same way that Cleave 3 is gonna work through stealth. These guys are gonna scatter damage it. They're just gonna pump out firepower and deal damage, and that's worth the forward energy in my opinion. I like their ability. I like their stats. I like the concept. They're the only heavy support squad, I believe, for the World Eaters, that's how they were. Nobody liked to sling the heavy bolter stuff in the World Eaters. It was get up into the front lines and do it. You don't see these guys enough. But when they do, you don't want them to stick around. You want to take care of them. And if you're running a deck and you can utilize those guys very well, props to you. Armor of Mars is, I think it's been changed a little bit to some degree now. I think initially it was just straight cost 7, heal 7, and if you control no troops, return it to your hand. Now the way it works, it starts at 6, and if it goes to your hand, it increases its cost by 1 more. So it can still be used over and over and over again, but to a detrimental degree, especially if you need to get more than your warlord onto the table. But not bad. Gives yourself 7. I think if you've got it, there's no reason not to include it in your deck, because it's a heal and it has a potential to multiple heal, and late game sometimes it could just be that 7 that really swings everything into your favor. So if you see that in the shop, I'd not pass it up. It's a good one. Gorefather, it took me a while. I was on the fence to get forward, and I figured, well, it was the besides Angron, it's the last legendary I needed, so I picked it up. It gives Cleave 2 to your warlord. It doesn't up their attack any, and it's a 6. It's not good in the Karn deck at all. It might be good in the Angron deck depending on how you've built it. I've seen it used, and it gets used decently and moderately, especially if it's like a one-man Angron deck where your focus is solely on Angron and you want to pump them up as much as possible. That's great. It's not a staple. I wouldn't call it a staple. But it's not a bad card. So take it as is. I guess it just depends on how you're building them up. Hidden Strength, I've seen in event decks. I like it. It's too costly though for what it does. If you happen to get it with an abandoned supplies, I think the 4 cost makes more sense. It's a rare. It should be a slightly less cost. At this point in the game with a 6 energy, you're not going to have too many troops on the table, because then on top of that, it's got to last to the next turn to to get damaged and to give those boosts. So I don't like it as much. For less cost, you're getting Argus, which is much more effective, or for less cost, you're getting Lork Squad or the Land Speeder Squad, which are just more effective. Even though they're not pumping damage, their damage is across the board, or it's amplified, or has multiple use. So I like the idea for it. I just think the card itself is overcost, just like this guy is overcost. Great backlash, except it deals 2 damage to all units, which includes your side of the table. and that might work if you are relying on that to, say, take your Angron down to 1 HP, but I wouldn't bank on it. It's a vehicle, so it's susceptible to crack grenades. It's susceptible to direct rask. It's not... I'd pass on it. These guys are okay. I'd pass on them as well. They just... The high cost, in general, we'll keep looking at here, but I think most of the high cost World Eater cards are worth passing on. In a certain deck, if you're building it a certain way, or if you're playing the right opponent, and I think that might be more key, they're beneficial. But in the game, the way the game state is now, World Eater decks above cost 6 just don't make sense, except for Conqueror and Merciless. I mean, that is the exception. So Dort is like an amplified for... He's a 7/7/7. So he's an amplified Barsk, which is a 3/4. So this guy, for 4 cost more, is 4 up attack, 3 up health, does the exact same effect. I was disappointed. I was disappointed when I saw that guy. I was disappointed when I saw this. I love the artwork on this card. And this line is iconic with the World Eaters for the Blood God. I don't think I've ever seen more than 5 troops on a board with 2 health to them. It's very circumstantial. It's a 7 cost. It summons a Slayer of Worlds. That sounds so cool. It just doesn't... Why use that when I can use this for 3 points less? Doesn't deal anything to my side of the table, and potentially just going to give a Mark of Chaos to any troops that I might have on the board. It's just a better card. Same rarity, just a better card, but I love the potential of this card. I wanted it to be better. It's not necessary. It doesn't mean that it won't be down the road, but at this time being, it just, pass. Macer Varen is another pass, which is a shame. It's great art. Great art. Great ability, really, when you think about it. But, geez, when he's coming out at 7, you're not going to have too many turns left in a World Eater deck where you're going to have friendly troops dying. And, again, that late in the game, there's so many card destruction or troop destruction cards that it might not even matter. Yeah, you can kill a troop and he becomes an 8/9. But why, when I can, for 2 energy less, just do 1 damage and have an 8/5? Can Macer Varen become 64 attack? Well, he can, but you only have to kill like 32 of your own units. And Macer, sorry, buddy, you're not as cool as Argus. Merciless is a good card. I ran one of them for a long time. I don't know if Angron runs enough of these. I've seen Angrons with these. I don't know if they run more than one. It deals 3 damage to all units, which includes your side of the table. But for each unit killed, you're drawing a card. Again, drawing cards. Again, mass damage across the board. Again, a great answer to stealth. World Eaters have got it. Yes, it's a 7 cost, but for what it does, it seems very viable. It seems very useful. It's never a bad deal. You can Merciless yourself down to 1 HP and use your Whispers. What's not to like? Blades of Fury seems cool, but they're just too costly. They've got the very similar to Skane, but they're 3 energy late. If Skane was 4 and Blade of Fury was 6, with even a 6/6 as opposed to a 6/9, that wouldn't be a bad deal, but they're not great. Goust, seen in event decks. Outside of that, be honest, I mean, there's not too many. You might have a World Eater, you might have an Erland game that goes over round 9. Not often enough for it matters. So it's a cool art, it's a cool concept. these guys pumping up for getting, for taking in. They've got 8 health, so they can take some more. But the games just don't go that long for them to be useful. Conqueror is another board clear, and it's huge. Destroys all troops in play. And if you're running like a solo Angron deck where you don't have any troops, then that's no detriment to you. Your opponent has turn 7, they drop 2 or 3 troops, and they feel like they finally got a board presence, and then you're just like, nope, get rid of them, and I'm going to attack your warlord for 3. It's just massive. It's epic. I don't know. I've seen lists with 2. I've seen lists with 1. I don't think there's any reason not to include at least 1 in Angron. Sometimes it's very necessary, and sometimes you can tell that they're like using all their card draws to try to get to the Conqueror, and they just don't get it in time. It does what it needs to do. Honor Distribution, again, it very much in the same way that Macer is a great concept. When a friendly troop dies, deal 3 damage. But at turn 9, how many friendly troops are you going to have on the table? How many of them are going to be? Is it going to matter? It's a filler. It's a space filler. I don't think you'll ever see that in a deck outside of events. Battle's Glory now. I've seen this in bot decks, in Erland bot decks, which like spams front line and front line and front line. This is his closer because it has shield and front line, and it's an 8/9, and that's pretty beefy, and that's cool. It's a nice bot deck, but it's a bot deck. I would like to see people take that bot deck concept and expand upon it and use it effectively in ladder, but until you do, I don't think you're going to see this card outside of that deck. And that brings us back to the Whispers. So that is the World Eaters deck. Or not the World Eaters deck, I'm sorry, the World Eaters card pool. Decks can range, but they range very much in terms of super aggro, in your face, utilizing Imperial cards such as Mortar Strike, Lectitio Divinatus, Goldstone Hunters, Mortar Strike dealing 5 damage. I mean, sometimes you use Karn to kill a 4 troop, a 4 health troop, a 2/4, and then you just do 5 to your opponent's warlord because there's no other troops on the table. It's still a better trade-off with Karn. Angron's very much the same, or better yet, if they don't have anything on the table, boom, they take 3, then they take 5, and that's 8. And then, utilizing all the wonderful random damage that Chaos brings. Breach, here's 2. Screamers is more, more to a unit, but Artillery Strike, here's 2. Satellites, here's 1 to 4. Just damage, 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 in your face, in your face, in your face. Because that's what the World Eaters do. That's what they do. If you're running Karn, some cards to consider. You gotta have Malgator in every deck. That doesn't change. Karn or Angron, it doesn't change, because lifting up that frontline troop or that troop that's gonna wreck your face is never a bad thing. Dropping somebody who's got a rally effect and does damage, and then using Malgator and dropping them again, that's great. But these guys here, you want to use these in Karn, or even Angron, because removing stun and keeping him on the offensive is huge. They're good. Those are good units in general, but especially in World Eaters, because World Eaters needs that health. They need to keep going. They need to sustain themselves to outlast and outperform. That's it. That's. I mean, there's other cards that do synergy well, but those are the must-have or highly recommended. I'd recommend a Crack Grenade, 1 to 2, depending on what you're seeing a lot. If you're seeing a lot of vehicles, 2 is better. If you're playing Angron, 2 might be better in general, because that is, again, it's another card that you can use on yourself to do damage, to get to Whisper range if you need to. Not always required, but, not a bad thing. Oh, sorry. I keep going. I see the Imperial Eagle, and I'm thinking that it's the Imperials. Manifest Destiny is probably another great one for Karn and for Angron, giving Survivor 5-tier Warlord, because they're gonna be beating face. You're gonna be using them, and that's just 5 extra health. But it's also Survivor, so it's like past your threshold. Not a bad choice. Again, it's a legendary, but if you've got it and you want to figure out a way to squeeze it in, you're going to get the right usage out of it in a World Eaters deck especially. So aggro, 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 and not underperforming at all. I mean, the statistics have shown as the game has gone on, World Eaters, Angron especially, continues to be a top deck. Maybe not the top deck, maybe the top deck. I'm not really sure what the last Q&A said from the devs. If you're lucky enough to have him, you shouldn't feel too bad about running him for the time being. Enjoy him. I'm jealous. If I had Angron right now, I'd be running him. I'm enjoying playing with the Salamanders and Numian, but it's eating at me, some of these Primarchs at this point that I don't have. I wish I did have, because Angron is the only card now I need for World Eaters, and then I would be able to just feel complete there. But you know, that's the way the game goes. It keeps us going into it, keeps us looking for the next thing. So anyways, that's it. I'm not doing any games. This is just a card by card today. Next up, it looks like we're going to be looking at the Emperor's Children, so we're going to be talking about Perfection, and I think Emperor's Children operate just a strong deck. I wouldn't even go so far as to say mid-range, because they have the potential to go outside of mid-range very quickly. I would say probably a close tie between Sons of Horus and Emperor's Children as probably the most versatile legions currently in the game. So really fun. Looking forward to talking about those guys here coming up with the next video. So anyways, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. Keep playing legions, and we'll go from there. See you next time.